Welcome to the 3-1 podcast, and this is on ecology. And the first thing we're going to do is define what ecology is, and we're going to call it the scientific study of interactions among organisms and between their environment and their surroundings. And this is the gentleman who coined the phrase ecology. The first, I'm going to talk about the biosphere, which is the combined portions of the planet in which all of life exists. Now, as you can see in this picture, I have several of those things. It can include the land. Here's the land right here. It can include water, and I have a picture of a lake. It also can include the air or the atmosphere above it. These are all places where life can exist. And this is pretty much, you can see it extends pretty far above the surface, and it also exists very below the ocean. So the interaction we're going to talk about, and you're going to see this more in other chapters, we're going to talk about a web of interactions between the organisms and the environment they're in. And you can see this web right here. Exists some predators and some prey and grass, even something that you would just think was the animals, but it also considers the plant life in that. And we're going to talk about this interdependence as we get more into this chapter on ecology. So what different levels of organization do ecologists study? Well, this is very similar to what we talked about before. The range can go from a single individual to an entire biosphere. And if you remember, we talked about the 8 levels of organization. We also included cells and molecules and atoms, cells and right down to the very smallest level possible. But we're going to start with the individual here and go upward. So you can see here are the levels of organization, and on the next page we can see them. We're going to start with an individual, and we're going to remember the word species. That's a group of organisms that are so similar that they can breed and reproduce. For instance, dogs are all considered one species, even though you have different breeds. They all can reproduce together. But something as similar as an orangutan and a gorilla cannot reproduce together. They're actually 2 different species. Next up is a population, which is a group of individuals that are in the same species and live in the same area. Think of like a herd of buffalo or a herd of, some type of elk or something living together in a group. They're all the same species. They're all the same all the same type of organism. Then we move on to community, and this is different populations that live together. For instance, we see an elk, we see a wolf, I think of some type, probably a beaver, here's a rabbit, here's an owl. So they're all in the same community. They're all the living organisms of different species that live together. Now, ecosystem is a collection of all the organisms that live in the place, along with things that are not living or physical. For instance, here we now have a lake. Here we probably have this the dirt, the ground, the soil, the rocks, the air around it. These are all things that are non-living, and included with the bear and the beaver and the owl and the elk, the moose. Once again, now you have an ecosystem. Biome is a group of ecosystems that have the same climate and similar dominant communities. Up here, you can see they highlighted in the blue here, Arctic tundra. So these guys are all pretty much in that. I think it's Arctic tundra. I have to look it up. But these guys are all in the same biome, meaning the biome here in this part of eastern Canada, the ecosystem in this part of eastern Canada is not that much different than the ecosystem in the western part of Canada. They're still going to have the same types of organisms, the same communities, the same, basically the same ecosystem. And then lastly, the biosphere is all the biomes together, and that we call the entire biosphere. So what methods are used to study ecology? This is pretty simple. You're going to use three basic approaches: observe, experiment, model. And they all use a scientific method to guide the way that you study ecology. Observing is just simply observing and taking data and from the world around you. Then we can use experiments to test hypotheses. We're pretty familiar with that. They can do it in the lab, or they can do it out in the wild. And then ecologists also going to make models, and you can see this is a pretty complex model of what happens to with a forest or with any type of land as you abandon it and you clear it and cut it and etc. This is how the land is going to react to it. And models are and this is from observations and taking data, and then you can understand how this works by using a model to put in terms that you can interpret. And often these models can be used to make predictions. Right now they're using models right now to predict what's going to happen to this planet as the temperature rises on the planet. We're going to start to see changes in the amount of the height of the sea level. We see changes to the ice cap, and these are all based on models. These are all predictions based on ecological models. And here's the quiz. And that's the end of this section.